Looks like we're live. What's going on, everybody? Hope y'all having a good Memorial Day weekend. So what's everybody got going on this Saturday night? Anybody doing barbecuing today? Barbecuing, and that's a good plan for the weekend. Now let me do the deed, share the link. Starting to feel a little bit better. Been feeling sick all damn most of the week since probably around Tuesday, I guess. Damn, it didn't post right in the militia. Let me delete that and repost it. It probably counts as a fucking post. It probably counts as two separate posts. Bastards. That's better. Gotta wait for this shit to come up. It's a little slow. What's going on, Mikey? Starting to drink, huh? It's a good thing to do about 8 o'clock on Saturday night, ain't it? What's going on, Mark? What's up, Clint? Shrimp and ribeyes on the bobby. Sounds like awesome plan, brother. What's going on, Curtis? Ribeyes and shrimp. We had spiral ham, baked beans, and homemade macaroni and cheese. Pretty damn good. Oh yeah, and corn on the cob. Can't forget that, man. We got a killer deal at Myers this past week. We bought a bunch. We didn't buy nothing to do anything else with, but had sweet corn on sale for 50, or I'm sorry, 20 cents an ear. 5 ears for $1. So we bought a bunch of corn. We're gonna put some up. Should have bought more. But we're gonna put some up and eat some fresh, man. It's good. Have y'all ever microwaved your corn? Like 3 to 4 minutes per ear inside the husk. Everything, just take it straight from the store. You can wash the outside of it off if it makes you feel better, but I just go straight into the microwave, husk and all, tassels, everything, silks and all. 3 to 4 minutes each ear. And when you take it out, you cut the bottom piece of the corn off, not top where the tassels are, the very bottom. And right at the past the bend where it comes up, and you can squeeze them out of the husk. And man, they're cooked in their own juices, and they're pretty damn good that way, I have to say. And it's a really good. I do like 6 minutes for 2 ears, and that's a great snack. Really good, quick, easy snack. Late night. It's good, sweet peaches and cream looking corn too. I'm sure it's that same stuff everybody gets. And I guess it's this time of year. It's probably coming out of Mexico, maybe. I'm guessing. Pretty damn good corn though. Maybe somebody out to Florida doesn't have none. No, they wouldn't have nothing like that this week. That has to be from Mexico or somewhere. Yeah. What's going on, Wayne? What's up, brother? When doing a run, do you have to do a stripping and spirit run? No. No, you don't. No rules. There's no have tos. I mean, if you're talking about, you know, going commercial and stuff, there's rules, of course, that have to be met. But amongst us, I mean, hell, if it's good with one run, just be happy with it. You don't have to strip and do spirit runs. I mean, if you have a bunch to do and you just want to strip a bunch off and just get the alcohol real quick and then do a final run, I mean, there's something to be said for that. Just speed up the process if you want to do a double distillation. And run something that, doesn't get hurt too bad by doing. Sometimes double distillation's better. And, it's all based on opinions and stuff and what you like. If you do it once and it just has too much darkness, too much of the grunge, you can run it again, The molasses tends to sometimes get overpowering or get a little too grungy. What's going on, Mr. Meredith? Yeah, it's a great way to cook the corn, man. It really works well. And it's much better than boiling corn. Even with diluting things, but if you boil corn, to me, you taking flavor out of it. So I prefer to do it in the microwave like that. We've been doing it for about 5-7 years. I found out I used to boil the corn, like everybody else, and try to cook it that way. But this way, it seems to maintain a little freshness, a little more flavor. Yeah, I got so far with it. But yeah, it gives me a little more flavor. Let me see. Let me scroll. I missed a question. I will get to that. Okay. Oh yeah, fresh corn to use for like a 20-gallon mash. Well, fresh corn, are we talking about ears or pounds or exactly how you're going to measure it? First question. Back in the old days, a lot of people, when the fresh corn, they just mulch it all up, cob and all. And they used to make a corn cob shine, and corn cob jelly, things like that. So it really depends on what you want, what your expectations. But you have to take into consideration that it's not dried. So your weight's not going to be anywhere close to what a dried corn with starch is going to return, like a sweet corn. Um, so it's going to take generally more. But just again, use your hydrometer, cook it up just like you normally would, gelatinize it, amylase it, convert it, and check your gravity, and adjust for weight. But I'd say probably it's 2.5 for dried corn with starch conversion. So with sweet and having a lot of that water weight already in there, where it's not dried. um, I'd say you're going to look at, probably if you were to measure it by weight, at least double, because there's a lot of water weight in that. So you just use your hydrometer, and adjust. Every corn is going to have different amounts of sweetness and sugars. This peaches and cream's got seems to have quite a bit of sugars in it. So just use your hydrometer after you do your conversions, and adjust, for the corn. If you have to add a little dextrose or corn sugars or syrup to it, to bump it up a little bit, that'll work too. And next time you just know to use a little bit more of this corn. But sometimes corn's, not. It's like we were talking about this just before we logged on in a group. Somebody posted a really nice. I think it was Jason Acosta. Somebody posted a really nice um, chart that I'll share. Let's see, let me find that. And it's similar to the ones I showed, but it adds actually some more stuff. So you can add this to your. Let me throw this up there. Give you an idea about how much of each to use. The best thing to use, you have to have a hydrometer. A lot of people ask about recipes and stuff, and you can use a hydrometer to make your own recipes. That it's all about how much sugar, and all recipes will have to be fluid based on how much sugar is actually in the fruit you used. And in the charts that I shared, um, it shows different. It goes like 3 to 6, right? And people are always like, "Well, you mean 3 to 6?" Well, three, if it's really sweet, 3 pounds should do it. But if it's on the other side of the scale and it's not sweet at all, like apples has a pretty large swing, then it's going to be a higher number, right, to get that same amount of sweetness. So I can share it real quick. There it is. Here's Jason Fisher said it. Wish I could zoom that up a little bit. Let me see. I can do that differently. Let's see if this will work. I'm learning how to do things more and more. Let's see if this will work better. No. Oh, it won't work that way. Okay, anyway. So on this, cancel that out. So on this, it's like apples. Like I said, it has a really huge swing, like 7 for really sweet apples, and up to 16 for like some really tart freaking apples. So, and it also has amylase. Because a lot of people don't realize with a lot of fruit. And I checked it. Make sure because bananas is a big thing that you should always. When you make a banana brandy, you can always add some amylase to get more sugars um, out of your bananas. and it's got 1 to 2 here, so that's accurate, and that's right. And some of these others, are have some starches that are recoverable. Some that are kind of surprising. I wasn't aware that like blueberries had a lot of starch. I've never used amylase with my blueberries or cherries or any of those things, but like bananas and plums and other things like that. Yeah, down here's plums, definitely potatoes, of course. But with some of these other fruits, I've never really thought about the starch level of the fruit, but I guess there's every bit of sugar you can convert out of them, the better. But I'm not sure. Maybe that would affect the flavors. So that's something to experiment with. But anyway, that's why it has a low to high scale. And I do believe this one has corn sweet on it, which is what I wanted to point out to you. So this is going to be 6 to 8 pounds of sweet corn as opposed to, well, it's not going to tell us, as opposed to 2.5, we know, to 3, right? With dry corn. So yeah, that's right, about twice as much. And I guess this 8 would represent some not so sweet corn, but I'd say that 6 would probably get you by pretty well, to answer your question there. And thanks to Jason Fisher for posting this in one of the other groups. I'm going to try to enlarge this, and let me do that now. Fix that pic real quick. Okay, let's see. All right. Let's post that from my screenshots and see if it's any better. All right, let me remove this, and I'll post this in the militia. The screenshot I just took. Let me present that. Yeah, we can see that a little bit better. Let me highlight your question there. But here's for people that want to do a screenshot to copy and paste this, you can, or this right here will be in the militia and DIY shining stuff. And Rock got files. I'll move them up to there. But this is a good little chart. This is pounds of this per gallon of water, and this is about what you'd expect for starting gravity with this. And you can use this for wine recipes too, because the one I have, I double checked, and it correlates perfectly with these same numbers. So that one I shared in the past, it just doesn't have as much stuff on it as this one does. So I'm gonna start using this one instead to help some of the people that want to know how many pounds of lychee they need. Whatever the fuck that is. I don't know what lychee is. Somebody that loves lychee is probably thinking what an idiot I am. Lychee's the best fucking thing ever. Anybody? Y'all know what lychee is? I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention over here, but who knows what lychee is? Let me get back to over here. I hope that answers your question. So yeah, sweet corn would probably be about double what you would use in dry because of the water weight differences. Yep. But that's I didn't say for 20-gallon mash. I would say you'd be probably looking at least 6 pounds per gallon. So 6 times 20. So you'd be looking at 120 pounds of sweet corn. But I don't think you'd have to add as much water because a lot of that's going to be juicy. That's a lot. That seems like a lot, doesn't it? But 2.5 would be 50, so it's going to be almost double that. So yeah, but you're not going to be adding as much water. You're going to be getting a lot of corn juices. Like it was mentioned the corn juices. Uh, but yeah, you get a lot. Yeah, Scott was. You get a lot of juice, whereas you would normally be using water, and that juice, will have some concentrated flavor. So yeah, you're gonna get good flavor out of it doing it that way because you're using the corn juice instead of a dried corn with water. If you follow me, good point, Scott. Yeah, and there you go. Yeah, I hadn't read ahead to what you're saying. I'm just scrolling down as I go. But yeah, um, wouldn't lose flavor. I don't know. As opposed to well, it depends. One, you're doing a conversion, more of a conversion, because in the sweet corn you have less starch, and more sugars. Because it's selectively bred that way. Yellow dent number two on the field corn is not considered a sweet corn, and it's bred for its starch content. So the animals that eat it can convert that starch in their system and use it for energy for now and store it for later. So it's a little bit it's different, a different corn. But those starches we can convert and get the same amount of sugar that you can almost out of a sweet corn. It's a little less, not as sweet. Um, so that's why it'd be about double. Awesome. Sounds good, bro. Well, that's good, brother. You'll know when you taste it. If it's something really, if it's good, you taste it. If it's good, well, don't fuck with it. That's something you learn is if it's good, just be happy with it and if you think you can improve on it, maybe run it again and get that second distillation and that additional cuts, made out of it and see what you think about it. I mean, it only gets more refined as you rerun it and cut it. You every time you're removing more of the bad stuff and retaining some of the good, but always remember that some of that bad stuff will maintain throughout the whole run. It's just less concentrations of it. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you can always do it in one run with the flag or with a little reflux, clean it up and get it all done in one run, or you can strip it and run it twice. Yeah, it really depends on your setup. If you got a pretty much a pot still, um, you might have to run it a couple times to get what you want. If you're not getting that second distillation, if you have a thumper, maybe that second distillation in the thumper, will be enough. And if not, then you can always batch it up with the next mash and or more mash and proof it down with it and run it again and just keep building flavor. And taking out some of the bad each run. Yeah, I mean, well, fresh corn for 20 gallon, even dried corn, which has no water weight, for 20 gallon would be a minimum of 40, 2 pounds per gallon, unless you're planning on adding a lot of sugar. So, you have to kind of go by the hydrometer and, and sweet corn has a set specific gravity without adding a lot of water. So, like we were talking about the juices and stuff in it. So, when you use a sweet corn, you're going to be adding less water. So it's not like, you would be putting 20 gallons of water on top of an equal amount of sweet corn like you would dry, right? That makes sense. Um, so you're not going to be using as much water, but to get that volume in your mash, you're going to need to use a lot more corn. So you're going to have to use at least double the corn. So I mean, you're still going to maintain that specific gravity, because basically one ear will have a specific gravity. Let's just say 1.055. Once you grind it all up and in its juices, it's 1.055, with just a little bit of water added. So that same amount of water ratio to cob corn ratio will maintain the same throughout. So whether you do a very small amount or a whole lot, each of that amount is going to be, each cob or is going to be the same gravity with a little water added, no matter how many gallons you want. So let's just say hypothetically 4 ears and a quart of water. I'm just going to throw that out there. Don't use that as a ratio, but just as an example. So if 4 ears and a quart of water is giving you a 1.060, 16 ears in a gallon of water is going to give you the same thing. See what I'm saying? So you just scale it up for, how much gallon wise you're going to need. And I'd say, with you're going to go 20 with just plain corn, dried corn, you'd be using a 50-pound bag, right? That's 2.5 pounds per gallon, which is a base 2.5. Most people say 2.5 to 3 pounds of dried corn per gallon, right? So with sweet corn, it's gonna take probably twice that, but not probably not quite twice. It's gonna be maybe a little less than twice. Yeah, this is a good little chart. What's going on, Mark? Hope you're having a good weekend, brother. Yeah, you got to go into work early tomorrow, or you got a break on that? Yeah, man, quarter cob jelly's good. I think Tom Crum was talking about that to me earlier this week when I was telling him about my corn deal. Billy just posted a video. He ran it a few times. Coffee flavor came through. Bit of banana. Awesome. Yeah, a lot of times those rum uh, washes don't really finish all the way. There's some unfermentable sugars in the molasses that, unless you use specific enzymes, you're not really going to get at them. You got to break them up with some enzymes, specific enzymes. So I think maybe using some rum yeast might have some of that in it, so it might finish a little drier. But yeah, there's a lot of unfermentable sugars in some molasses. So, oh, already, huh? I answered my question. And I'm not able to keep up again. All right, I'm gonna try to move on. Let's see. Well, if you need to or not, I mean, it's you're talking about running it twice. Well, you can run it the first time, okay, and when it's done, and comes out, and you're in your hearts, you take a little sample and proof it down, and taste it and see what it tastes like. If it has a good taste to it and you're satisfied with it as a 80 90 proof rum, whatever, and you think it has a good taste, and then you can stop there. If you're not happy with it and you think that it's still got a heavy taste, grungy taste, or a little darkness, or not enough, beauty is you can always run it and do make changes to it. So If you're not happy with it on the first run it again. It'll take some of that. It'll take more of it out and be a little bit more refined. You won't have maybe as much depth, but you might lose some of that flavor that you're not liking. So that's why I say, it's all about opinions. So it's hard to give somebody a factual answer to something that is based on what people's perceptions are. So I mean, if you like the way it tastes, then I'd say you've achieved what you want to do. But if you taste it, I know for a lot of people, like on their first time, you might not, but you'll know if you like it or not, right? So I mean, you can get some like store-bought rum and kind of compare and taste theirs and yours side by side, and if you're not impressed or think it's equal or close, run it again. But it's sometimes good because some of my vodkas, I'm like, I don't know, it's just not doesn't taste all that great. And then I'll go get a shot of Tito's or something and try it, and then taste fine. I'm like, it's fine. It's better than that shit, so it's okay. So sometimes it's good to do that and do a little side by side comparisons. But and getting the most out of it, run it all the way down. Don't stop at 80 proof when it starts to get in the tails or whatever proof it starts to get in the tails at, whether that be 90, 100, or 80, whatever. That will vary. But don't stop there. If you're worried about the most out of it, you can run it all the way down. And that way, when you do get those subsequent runs, if you decide to take them, you can add those tails back in and get more production and maintain flavor, a lot more flavor than just proofing it down and rerunning it again. So definitely be a good way to help maintain flavors and get more out of it. So do you have? Oh my, you're gonna ask me. Do you have? Well, oh, that chart? No, no, this is a new chart. You'll want the chart. And yes, yeah, you still heat it up and gelatinize it. It's the same. It's not just because it's sweet doesn't mean that there's still some starch in there that you can convert with. You can probably use less, and truth be told, you could probably just run it without. You know, using a lot of amylase, you could probably heat it to 160 and use the powder and just break down what starch you can with it. Um, but I'm not sure, gelatinizing a sweet corn, how much, there's not a lot of starch in there, but there's some. I'd probably just cook it the same. Probably not going to have to cook it as long, but yeah, cook it and use your amylase and treat it like, a normal corn. But just realize it's probably not going to get as thick as a dry field corn when it's gelatinizing. But yeah, I definitely would go ahead and use the amylase for sure, and cook it and use the amylase for sure. Yeah, you can smoke it. I don't toast it. Toast it sounds like you're um, denaturing enzymes. So and some. I don't know if I would go that far with it. Um, but yeah, I guess yeah, it's not malted. Smoking it, I prefer to smoke instead of toast. I'm not toasted. I've done smoking, kind of indirect heat, kind of smoking with different things, barley and wheat and rye and corn and all the different grains. But I've not toasted. Not done any toasting on any grains. Toasted oats, maybe. Sounds interesting. No, I haven't, Mark. Just done the smoking. Hello, Marcia. What's going on, Mickey B? Where is Phil? He is probably chilling with his 15 children. That's right, brother. Run it like you like it, man. I mean, there's no rules to that. It's kind of like Outback. No rules, just right. It's hard for me to say if that first run is going to be good. It all boils down on the mash and how good that ended up turning out, and your satisfaction with it. If you run that one time and proof it down, proof those hearts down, and do a little test of it, and see what you think about it, stick with it. That's right. Or run it again, and you can run it again with your back set in there if you're not, to maintain flavor. So you just pull out some heads and some, four shots, and dump tails and hearts back in there and run it again and pull out some more fours and heads, because they'll run the first time it runs through, and I guess subsequent all as well, but in much less uh, percentages. But most of your fours and heads, of course, come off early, but they found that it does run throughout the run and all the way into the tails. Um, so after your first run, a lot of people say, do you make cuts each run? I do when I strip, because I'm not putting acetone back into my second run. I don't give a fuck. I don't need the volume that much, and I don't need to try to squeeze a little bit of ethanol out of the acetone. And I just don't do it. A lot of people do. I just say, the sooner and more I can get out of it, the better. And the next time I run it, I'll take a little bit out then too, because I know what little is left will probably be coming off early, just the same, but it'll probably run out throughout the run just as it does before. But the azeotrope, breaks down over each run. So I'd say that it'd be a good idea too. In small amounts, though, much smaller amounts. Yep, neutral it out. How much sugar per 10-gallon still for moonshine? Well, now, if you're just using sugar alone, probably couple of pounds per gallon. If you're just running sugar and water, if that's the type of shine you're talking about making. But most people will add some fruit and grains and try to get away from the sugar altogether. And the further you can get from just sugar to just grains or just fruits, the better it gets, Nikki. Yeah, absolutely. I run her all the way down to 10 or 20. If I got time, I'll take her down to 10. Not really fool around with getting below 10 proof, which is 5%. Um, reason being, what happens when you get down to, let me find this chart. Let me see. When you get down to about 5% alcohol, I think it's actually 4. Um, as you're pulling it off the steel, you pull off water in the same proportion all the way throughout the rest of the run because of the bond and the azeotropes. Um, so what happens is the bond can't be broken beyond that. And I'll show you the chart here, and that's easier to understand. Easier to explain, showing the chart at the same time. And it's not on there. Let's see. We found this chart. Yeah, here we go. Okay, well, you've seen this chart before. But the reason it doesn't go beyond here is because you really can't get beyond that proof unless you have a vacuum or no water. So the boiling point, But over here at 210, see, that's the boiling point of water. So as the azeotrope loses, see, azeotrope means that the boiling points have changed. So as instead of 173.1 down here, ethanol's boiling point. If it's almost pure ethanol, yes, that's the boiling point. But as you add water, that boiling point changes. See, the boiling point increases. And the opposite with water. The more alcohol you're adding to the water, the lower you're bringing its boiling point. See, so you're changing these boiling points because of the azeotropic properties of water, alcohol, and some of the other propanols and other things in the mash itself here. So, but once you get to this point here, it never crosses this line. It goes basically straight up from here, right next to this line, perpendicular, because it will boil off at a given percent of water and a given percent of ethanol, which would be about 4% or about 8 proof. Maybe it's 4 proof, but it's down to nothing. But it doesn't get any lower. It you'll just get a constant water alcohol coming off at that percentage, like 96% water, 4% alcohol, until you run out of water. Okay. So there's a point in here where it just becomes redundant to try to collect anymore, because then it's just a very low amount of alcohol and a lot of water. But it never runs out to where there's no alcohol left, because there will be no water left when it does that, if that makes sense. Kind of hard to explain. Yes, this is live. I'm just a little slow, brother. Just a little behind. I try to keep up the questions, but I try to bring on some charts and help explain, because I can talk about it, but it doesn't make as much sense, and it's hard for me to sometimes word things and answer them without using a lot of charts. And I like using charts because it helps people understand. It helps me understand it, but it helps me explain it better too. Yeah, I think I like it too. It's 160, and you can use it. And I like using the glucose along with it, unless of course I'm adding some malted barley or something like that on with it. Yeah, I like them edibles too. Those edibles are nice. We were making fun last night. Oh man, it was backstage. But I think I've come up with a new invention. You know how people are using suppositories for everything. We were talking about butt gummies. Oh, that's funny shit. But yeah, that's how crazy we get backstage on the Friday nights. Yeah, that's pretty funny stuff though. But yeah, a lot of people are partial to those edibles. Probably long term, maybe a little better for you too. Have I ever run with pure cane sugar? If so, yeah, I mean, yeah, I've made sugar shine. Yeah, I mean, you can make pure cane sugar shine all day. Differences to maybe an inverted sugar or a dextrose or something like that, if you're asking, or compared to a brown sugar with some molasses added or something like that, maybe, or you mean compared to grains or fruits? There's a lot of comparisons, but traditionally, a pure cane sugar or just basic table sugar. Um, I'm not sure which one you're talking about. A lot of people call pure cane sugar table sugar because it's made from cane sugar, and then there's pure cane sugar, which is squeezed from sugar cane. So depends on where you're from to what you're talking about. But just like table sugar from the bag, um, I agree. I'm not going to put it back in there. I don't care. A lot of people do. I think it's silly as shit, but to each their own. There's not that much ethanol that you recover. It's much easier to take out of the tails, and you don't have to deal with that. Yeah, the musty wet dog smell ain't pleasant, but it doesn't even compare to the strength and smell of acetone. It's just, yeah. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, man. Once you that's why you use your hydrometer. We were talking, I'm not sure if you was here, Daniel, but you use your hydrometer to make recipes. So people say, well, how much pounds of this for this many gallons of that? And it's you start out with, you know, get the fruit, get 5 pounds, mush up 5 pounds, add a quart of water, take the gravity, add another quart of water, take the gravity. And you can add that to where, okay, I'm at all fruit and I'm getting X gravity. So if you're wanting to make a really good brandy, a technical brandy, or a really good wine, you would want to try to use all fruit for your sugar, right? But as you distill more and learn that how much flavors get lost in the transition, and sometimes how it's expensive to get all juice for so much loss in flavor that you're going to deal with. Some people are like, fuck it, I'm going to use half the fruit and half sugar. And is the difference half as bad? Probably not. So I mean, there's a delicate balance. So, you can just, practice changing, using your hydrometer to, you know, maybe if I just use 3/4 of the fruit and maybe a quarter sugar, let's get that hydrometer and try that, and just it's all trial and error to see what you can get and what works best with your still, your setup. That has a lot to do with it as well, what kind of end result you're going to get and whether you infuse or not. So, but make your own recipes. It just gravity. What it all boils down to is, do you have enough sugar in there to for the yeast to convert to make a decent run and it not be too hot. So that triple scale is one of the most important tools you can have. And you can make a lot of good recipes using it. Wait a minute. What temp do you add the powdered amylase? 160. Not a drop over, and try to keep it between 150 and 160 for at least a good hour or so. You want to get a good conversion. You want to it's most active at 160. It's starting to denature a little bit, but it's active enough that you get a lot of conversion power when it's that warm on the powdered. Um, and that needs to, it starts losing its efficacy any below 150. So 155 to 160 optimal, but try to keep it between 150 and 160. For your high temp, 185, 190. And of course keep it at that temp for as long for 90 minutes or so as the corn gelatinizes. You mix it early and let the corn gelatinize and thin out at the same time. Why my corn shine tastes so crazy? Well, Dustin, I don't know, brother. It's because you haven't been here often enough and listening and taking notes. What's it taste like, brother? How we talking crazy? I mean, how much corn we using? What kind of procedures are you using? Cracked corn? What kind of corn we got? How we processing it? How we converting it? Are we just there's lots of ways to do it. I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong. I mean, I used to take cornmeal and sugar and water and not even convert starches, do anything, and just make basically a cornmeal sugar shine. And for a long time, that was just fine and dandy. I learned to, do the grain thing and convert uh, and get a little bit more all grain out of it, and then eventually went to all grain. So you'll go through stages. But what kind of corn shine you making, brother? Swelling a 5-gallon number 2 char barrel right now. Awesome. Good deal, man. Just get you, what do you got in a tote? I find it's best just to get you a tote that'll fit in and put some inside, some outside, and just keep turning it and letting it soak it all up. Yeah, I helped old Mark Morgan. He's soaking one of his barrels when I was visiting with him last month. All right, Dustin. What's the skinny on your crazy corn, man? I'm all caught up. Yeah, Daniel, I've come to the conclusion that you definitely got to use that triple scale. I think it's one of the most important tools you can have. I mean, that and the proofing hydrometer, both those hydrometers are pretty essential. I know some people like to just go by taste, but I like empirical and dealing with numbers. So Britta's going to remove the crazy, huh? Well, we got to find out what's wrong with it, Patrick, before we start running it through a filter. It might crazy might just mean hot, or it. Who knows? What's going on, Jeffrey? No, I haven't, but I was thinking about doing a little comparison between this and some the yellow label when I do it. So I'm thinking about converting some corn and using this and and doing some of the yellow label on some of the unconverted. So I'm thinking about doing a little experiment and then kind of comparing flavors. So I'm gonna use the same amount of corn, 2.5. I'm gonna use high temp and on one of them, on the your yeast, and then let the yellow label do its thing on the other, and then compare the two. That'll be interesting. Um, Very interesting. I hope to do that in the next few weeks, but yeah, we'll see. I don't know, man. It'll be a little different, depending on the corn. I'm not using the same corn. I won't be using the Bloody Butcher that you used. I've got Amanda Palmer, and I'll probably use some Yellow Dent. Actually, I think I'm just gonna keep my experiment simple with the yellow label, then just do Yellow Dent, fresh Yellow Dent with some Amanda Palmer mixed in with it. Give it some depth and a little extra character. But I'm going to try both of those combined and I'm going to mix everything up and then cook half of it and then just cool ferment the other half with the yellow label. On my brandies, depends. Like on my dark fruit brandies, I use a Red Star Premier Rouge. And on my lighter colored fruits, I'll use a Red Star Premier Blanc or an EC1118, or certain varieties of that. But the 11, I think 16, the V1 1116 or V2, I think is 1116 is pretty decent as well. But I like that Red Star Premier Blanc and Rouge awful well. I like the flavors it has. The EC1118 has good clean flavors. So I tend to use those three probably the most, but uh, I'm going to definitely try to experiment with some different yeasts. And I use like the D47 for like meads and honeys and I'm going to try some different rum yeast. In the past, I've always used just a standard yeast. I've never used a rum specific yeast. So I'm going to see if there's some rum yeast that finish a little drier that might help convert some of the unfermentables in the molasses, where versus maybe just an EC1118 or something without and see if one does better and finishes drier. Because I know nothing's going to finish much drier than EC 1118, but it might not have the enzymes, the invertase enzymes added that will help uh, convert some of those unfermentables that are in the molasses. So that's an experiment that I want to try to do, and do a little controlled experiment on that and see how that works out. Um, but generally, I stick to, and on my grains, I'll use a data yeast or something like Firm Solution FSI 927 is a good one. I've used lots of bread yeast, but every bread yeast. Not used a lot of turbo yeast. I knew better, and so I hadn't fooled with too much of that. But I look forward to trying some different ones. I've got this yellow label angel yeast that will convert grains without any of the stuff. So I'm going to definitely experiment with that and see what kind of flavors I get with that soon. And I was talking about that just a little bit earlier. Awesome. He wouldn't have to. So, and a barrel makes it good, even better. So if it was good, it'll be great when it comes out of the barrel, man. Because the barrel adds like 60 to 80% of the flavor if you're looking for like a whiskey or bourbon, from your grain alcohol. Um, so if you have a grain and you're kind of prefer whiskey or bourbon and that type of drink, then you're going to really love it once you age it like that. Hello, Miss Lisa. Hope you're having a good Memorial Day weekend up there. Is it still cold up there? Best amylase. Well, again, subjective. Best is really hard to point out. I will say that most people prefer the high temp liquid for its simplicity and large range of temperatures and ease of use. Um, the powder works okay, works fine. Not as complete, I would say, as maybe the liquid. Definitely a smaller temperature variance, so it's really sensitive. I think most people have problems with it because they don't maintain that 10-degree heat we talked about earlier, 150 to 60 for the powder. So they don't maintain that heat temp properly for the long enough period of time for it to have the best effect. Therefore, they say it's shitty. Um, but it works fine. It had for years, but now that they have the liquid high temp, uh, it seems just to be a lot easier to use. And I think as far as the maker of it, I think there's probably only like a handful of makers, and everybody else buys it in bulk and rebrands. Um, so if you can find an original producer, you can find it a lot cheaper. I know that Broken Bones has it and sells it through North Georgia. I know Firm Solutions has some, and they've got a website online. I guess probably Fieldbilly has it too. I'm not sure if Fieldbilly carries it or not, but you can check on fieldbillymoonshine.com, and I'm pretty sure he probably has it. If not, he'll get it for you and sell it to you cheap. Um, yeah, I think Prohibition is who I usually use. It might be a little bit more expensive. I know you can get it through North Georgia, and I think they prefer to do it that way now. But I always hit him up on at Maggie Valley. He'll every year bring some and you know give a pretty good discount to brothers. So yeah, I usually get it from him. And after the discount, I'm probably paying less, so that works out great. But yeah, I try to use the Prohibition, but it's all good stuff and it all works well. But the high temp alpha and the liquid gluco is are the two that you want to use. And definitely want to, a lot of people use the alpha, but they don't follow up with the liquid gluco. And if they're not using a malted grain, they're really not getting a lot of sugar. So they're missing out on a lot of fermentables, and they won't get to them. They'll be unfermentable. What's going on, Jeff? Hope you're having a good weekend, brother. So, what's everybody barbecuing and drinking? I don't have nobody called shots. Myself. I'm starting to feel a little better than I was last night. But I'll tell you, since last Tuesday, I didn't feel good Wednesday when we had the class, and I'm feeling a little better tonight. Here's some of Jeff's Wheated Bloody Butcher Sour Mash number 4, 135 proof. Trying to kill me. 135 proof. Man, it's good. That's about a barrel proof. Deer, loin, and pintos. Man, that sounds good. There you go, Scott. Thank you, brother. I figured he'd have it on there. He's got about everything you need, man. Cheers, everybody. Deer, loin, and pinto. That's awesome. I don't know if everybody heard what earlier at the very beginning. I had spiral ham, homemade macaroni and cheese, and baked beans, and of course, some fresh corn on the cob. You're welcome, brother. Yeah, but you definitely want to use the gluco, and at the right temperature. So, anytime you use the alpha, you can either use your malted grains and use the beta glucanase. And a lot of people see that beta glucanase and they think, oh, that's the same thing, but beta and gluco. It's beta glucose, same thing. It's not technically the same thing. There's a beta glucanase that you get from malted grains, and that's called an endogenous enzyme that you're getting from within the grains that you're using, and malted corn if you're using malted corn. But a glucoamylase is a different temp and a little bit different makeup enzyme. Very similar to a beta glucanase, but actually a little more refined, and actually will debranch a little better than a beta glucanase. But I'm not saying it's better than using malts, because malts also have alpha built into them as well. So when you use like a high temp alpha amylase, and then use it with some grain, um, you know, you can use less and use it to supplement and make sure you get the conversion. You can use it to say a lot of times that, like if you have a 6-row recipe, because it's got a specific diastatic power that you need to convert the rest of the starches in your, grain bill. If you'd rather prefer to use maybe a 2-row as opposed to that 6-row, it's a little less expensive and has maybe a little better flavor. Again, opinions, but in general, get a little better price on it and get, maybe some different flavors, a little more variety from a lot of your 2-rows, and maybe a little less diastatic, but with use of with the use of that alpha, you don't need that extra diastatic, right? So you can cheat a little bit, use your liquid high temp half as much, as you normally would, and take advantage of, some of the alphas that are naturally in some of your malted grains to help even further break up things that high temp might not make, or powdered if you go powdered route. So, there's many ways to skin the cat, and getting conversions done. But I do like supplementing even when I'm using malted grains with a little high temp or a little powder. I've got quite a bit of powder, and I do prefer the high temp liquid. So I'm trying to use the powder as much as I can and get through it. And so on a lot of those, um, I'll try to supplement some. Maybe you can use a little high temp, and you can use a little powder, and then you use a little. Just don't use grossly too much. You don't affect the taste of it, but you can stretch it out. Ribeyes, bake, Jack Daniels 14. Damn. Loading up some tequila. Man, that's some good tequila too. I tell you what, I hope it's you gonna age it. Like this stuff. Tell you what, out of the two, this is definitely my favorite. And how long did you age this? Yeah, Mark, it will. Absolutely right. Yeah, man, that's good. Take the bear. How long, brother? Our glucose will continue to work throughout ferment. Yeah, absolutely. When you put the glucose in, you can take a reading then, your final gravity reading, and then you can take it again like the next day. And sometimes I've heard people had this conundrum, and I really wasn't sure what it was. It's a while back, but we figured out what it was. But their gravity went up higher, but they could tell that they had alcohol being produced, right? So how does the gravity go up and you produce alcohol at the same time, right? And it's because the glucose was working along with the yeast. And so when they put the glucose in, immediately put the yeast in, that glucose hadn't done nothing yet, right? So it ain't even taken effect yet. But when you do a gravity reading, it's showing you how much sugars you have. It doesn't know whether it's fermentables or not. But as the glucose works and it starts breaking it down, you get alcohol production, but that sugar level, it keeps converting them, and I don't know, it just showed higher maybe, and they couldn't figure out why their gravity was going up, but alcohol was being made at the same time. And I'm guessing because the glucose was continuing to work and put out fermentable sugars, but I don't know. Pretty interesting situation. I don't know. I would have to assume that was the case, or kind of like what the yellow label does. It starts out and you put the yeast in there, you have your gravity and shit because it's done nothing. So you've got water, you got grains, and you have no conversion happening. So you'll have like a zero gravity, with just corn thrown in with water. But it'll convert itself, and over time, it converts and then creates alcohol all at the same time, and that process continues until it's finished, which is amazing. So we're gonna, but yeah, definitely the glucose wheel. So a lot of people, I recommend to throw the glucose in and let it sit overnight before or at least 12, 24-hour period before you add in the yeast. and take your gravity right before, you know, you add that yeast. And that might give you a little more accurate reading of what your, you know, final gravity is, or starting gravity. Yeah, yeah. We scratched our heads. It was like, how is this, you know, creating more sugar and creating alcohol at the same time? And it had to have been where the glucose was still continuing to debranch and make more fermentable sugars, you know. Or things were getting converted, you know, that weren't before, you know, because that alpha, you know, and I've heard people talk about it, even what people consider sometimes unfermentable sugars, you know, um, if you let them go long enough, sometimes they get broken down too. Just a slower, long process that normally doesn't take place in a typical grain fermentation time. Yeah, I need to start soaking my barrel. I got a 15-gallon. I'm going to try to fill up with some brandy. Then I'm going to fill another one up with some whiskey or bourbon. I don't know. I guess I can't call it bourbon because it's a once used barrel, but be some whiskey. Let those sit, and after it sits a couple of years, I guess you could, for every quart you take out, put a quart back in. I think that'll work out fine. Just keep perpetuating it, you know, just take a quart out, put a quart in, take a pound out, put a pound in. It'd be nice to do that with the big 53, you wouldn't even notice it. But that's a big ass barrel. That's a lot of weight. You imagine how much weight that is? 53 gallons. What is it? Only 7 or 8 pounds per gallon. Let's see. Get the weight of ethanol. Yeah, 6.5. So it's a little less more. 6.5, 6.6. Let's just say 6.6. And that's 190 proof. So with water at 100 proof, yeah, that's 6.6. 6.6. So 53 times 6.6. Yeah, it's about 350, 350 pounds. That's a lot. 6.6 pounds per gallon. That's good to know, isn't it? Yeah, water's like 8.3, so it's considerably lighter than water. Right? It's cool. Huh? And I was wrong a few weeks back when we were talking about molecular sieves. For those that hadn't heard, I was thinking that the ethanol had a smaller molecule and went through the sieve, and that's totally wrong. The water is smaller and it goes through the molecular sieve and it retains the ethanol. I don't know how I got that wrong or why I said that, but after listing what I said and checking, double checking on that, yeah, I thought it was wrong. It was water is smaller molecule it goes through, so it traps ethanol. But that's really the only way you're going to get a pure 200 proof unless you distill it in a vacuum. Because once it touches air, it starts sucking water out of the air. And anything it touches, it takes water out. So it's hygroscopic. Come on, you guys. Y'all full of burgers and dogs. You got some questions. That's some good questions tonight, though. And if somebody that asks a question is still not 100% satisfied or has additional questions or want clarifications, feel free to say so. Or if you ask a question and I didn't get to it and I missed it, because I do jump up and down and back and forth a lot, and sometimes I can miss them. So if I do, ask me again. I promise I won't get mad, even if you ask the same one again. I'll just try to answer it in a different way. So what? I think this weekend would have been a hell of a time to put together a good old red, white, and blue American. He probably got some of that American blend. Get a little. I don't know if I'd use. I'd say I'd probably want to use a little Jimmy Red with some Ohio blue and some of that Cherokee white, maybe. Sounds like a damn good combo. 4-year-old yeast. Has it been in the refrigerator or just sitting out? And um, you can do what's called a starter and put it. I'm not sure what kind of yeast it is, but depending on the yeast, probably different ways to start it and temperatures to start it. A wine yeast probably in the high 80s. A bread yeast or something like that, maybe a little warmer. A tequila yeast, a little warmer. What kind of yeast is it? But you can use a starter. You can use the tablespoon per so many gallons, or if you're going to do 5 gallons, you can you know test some out in a jar. Put you a quarter tablespoon in a jar with third a cup of sugar. Get big old quart jar or half a gallon jar and shake it up about 90-degree water, 95, and put your yeast in there and shake it up. Take the lid off. Don't leave that lid on there because it's going to foam up, and just see how much foaming action you get out of it. See how much activity it has, and see how if it's still got some virility, and if so, it just may take more. So you can kind of gauge it, compare it to how really viable yeast. When I put it in a starter, it'll double in size over 30 minutes. Keep an eye on it too. Um, um, but yeah, just get a jar with warm water and use. You have to use a substantial amount of sugar and yeast to see if there's any kind of reaction. But I'd say a third of a tablespoon of yeast with a third of a cup of sugar and about that much warm water in a quart. Make sure it's 90, 95. Shake it up and watch it though. Keep an eye on it and put it in a bucket or something. That way, when it overflows, if it overflows and goes crazy, it's not going to ruin anything. You can just rinse it out of the bucket into the mash and use it. And use that as a part of your starter. Uh, But yeah, do what's called a yeast starter. I wouldn't use a Ziploc bag. Just use your old jar. Um, but if you did that and got no reaction, was the water warm in 90, 95 degrees? And you won't get immediate action. You need to let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour. And if that happens, you let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour and nothing happens, then you basically have a yeast nutrient. dead yeast can still be a yeast nutrient, so don't throw it away. You can just feed your yeast with it. Um, or maybe a sugar wash or something. You won't need it for a grain, but like if you do a brandy or a sugar wash or a rum or a tequila or something like that, and you want to feed your yeast, and you can use some of that to feed with. And if you have some that's still living, they'll do what they can. And if most of it's dead, it'll just feed other yeast that you supplement it that is viable, right? So, just make use of it either way. Don't throw it away. Yeah, if you keep it in the fridge, it'll keep a lot longer. If you seal it and keep all the air out of it, put it in the freezer, it'll last even longer. But if you put it in the freezer, acclimate it, and put it in the refrigerator, um, don't take it directly from the freezer and try to do a starter. Let it get to room temperature first. Let it sit out a while. And the same from the fridge. Let it sit out a while. I generally keep something I'm going to use in the next month in like one of those little sealable cups. It's got like a little plastic cup with a seal, not like a Tupperware. You could use a Tupperware though, and just use those for what you're going to be using in the next month or two. And that way it's always ready to use, room temperature. But if you take some directly out of the fridge, you can just let it sit for a few hours and get to room temp and acclimate it. They said, it's not good to really use straight from the fridge or freezer into it, but I've done that too. And I don't know that it made a huge difference, but it's one of those they say things. Uh, was asked this week if I claim my stuff is 100 proof, but don't numb their lips. My response, right, is or wrong. With someone doesn't know how to make cuts, sounds like methanol to me. If you get that numbing effect, I don't know about methanol. Really, it could be some things maybe in the heads, but 4 shots of methanol, um, unless you've got some really high proof brandy. Um, is that what it was? Was it on a brandy or a grain? But some brandies, will have a little bit more, but um, numbing, I don't know. People get different reactions when they put alcohol in their mouth. I know some people may think it anesthetizes and numbs or something because it's the proof or something, but I don't know. It's hard to say, brother. It's just, some people may just get that reaction from vodka, 80 proof vodka too, or 100 proof vodka or something, that just may be. I know the only thing goes numb on me is my senses, my brain, my thoughts. Oh, you had it sealed up in Ziploc bags and had to. Oh, you had a stroke. Well, it's if you put it in the 90-degree water with the sugar and let that sugar dissolve, and then add that yeast to it, and it's not foaming up or doing nothing after an hour or two. Like I say, just use it as a yeast nutrient. They can use it, as a nutrient, so you should be fine with that. If there's any like that survived, it's not going to be a big deal, if you mix a couple of different kinds. So yeah, I mean, just it's not all lost, it's you can use it. It's just not for the same purpose that you wanted, but yeah, you can still. use it for something. That's always a bright side, you know. Hopefully. And I hope you're recovering well from that stroke, brother. But yeah, 4 years is you know, does it have an expiration date on the bag? Usually my bags come with an expiration date. So 4 years may not be too bad if it had a 2 year expiration date when it went in at 4 years. So, it maybe it's just 2 years expired and might be somewhat viable. So, but yeah, try it with some warm water, 95, and and a good little amount of sugar in there for it to get going, and it'll let you know if there's anything left. If it doesn't do anything, just use it to feed them. Any tips for watermelon brandy? Man, we got a big watermelon brandy contest coming up. I don't know if I'm going to be giving all the tips out. I don't want to hurt myself in this competition because I know some of these people listening are going to be in on it. So I don't know, man. That may be something we have to talk about outside this until after firing the bottle. But some things I've talked about in the past. I'm not going to be that way. I'm just kidding around with you, but I'm not telling everything. Find something good for an infusion. If you got the jar eggs, help a lot with brandies that don't carry over, a whole lot of flavor. Watermelon's generally been known to be a pretty tough brandy to make with, strong, flavor. So the jar eggs certainly help a lot with that and infusing flavor over. Um, and try different infusion. Try different purees and different flavors and different candies. There's lots of things that you can try. But yeah, and you can take some watermelon and freeze dry it and use that in your infuser. There's a secret a lot of people don't know. I shouldn't probably tell. There's lots of things that you can do, but using the jar rigs, that helps a lot. Having those jar rigs and using an infusion and keep re-infusing as you go through your run, that really helps a lot. Helps a whole lot. I hope it's working for you, brother. Time for a mountain brandy. All right. 4 pounds of frozen fruit, 1 pound of oats per bucket. Sugar for more alcohol. Sounds decent. Well, what? First of all, what kind of fruit we going to use? I mean, is this going to be like an apple and oats? Are we going to have any other grain other than oats? Or, I mean, it sounds interesting. Apple oats sounds pretty interesting. Of course, apple rye, is interesting too, and that's a good combination. But it really depends on the fruit to how many pounds you want to use here. So I wouldn't be stuck on 4 pounds of frozen fruit. And I'm guessing when you say per bucket, I'm guessing per gallon. Um, and a pound of oats sounds good as hell. So maybe an apple rye with a little bit of rye and oats would be interesting. Um, any ideas what kind of fruit, Dad? What's going on, Tim? What's up, brother? Olive Nation, like this. Talking about this outfit. This is their peach, which doesn't carry over real well, but I've heard a lot of good things about it. It post flavors okay. but I was using it for an infusion and it didn't carry over as well. But that doesn't mean at all that some of their other flavors don't work. So I'm not going to discount them. I was a little bit let down on the peach performance. Didn't carry over as well as a Tyranny. But, something different. I tried. It does have a unique sweetness, I will say about it. Good, unique sweetness about it. That I really like and everybody really likes. But it just didn't have a lot of peach punch. It kind of let me down on a contest last year. And I did it I ran it like the week before the damn festival, which was a big mistake that I won't repeat. And I had no time to redo it, which was a disappointment. I knew it wasn't going to do well. It just didn't carry. But, Olive Nation, does supposedly have really other good, fruit flavors. I've not tried them. That was my first go at Olive Nation. I've used Tyranny and trying to think of the other one. Wait on a minute, Tyranny, and there's another one. Um, what's it called? Orin or something like that. Hell, I can't remember. What's going on, Hidden Harvest? But Tyranny and not Monin. So I'm getting bad, man. My memory's going bad. Berries, just mixed berries. Okay. Well, let's pop the chart back up here. And let's look at just say we got blackberries. So you want about 4 to 6 pounds of blackberries per gallon of water. So, if you got 4-pound frozen, that sounds about right. And throw those oats in there. Should be pretty good to go. You might, depending on the sweetness of your berries. But once you get it all mashed in, you can, like we talked about the hydrometer, drop your little hydrometer in there or strain some out. You don't want solids in there where you're testing, but mix it all up good, strain some out, and measure your starting gravity and see if you need to add any inverted sugar or dextrose or whatever your sweetener choice of sweeteners are, table sugar, whatever. Morena sugar, vanilla, whatever you want to sweeten with, high fructose corn syrup, whatever, lots of choices there as well. Vintners, yeah, Roger, he used Vintners in his peach brandy in the competition last year and to infuse with, and his came across really well. It came across good, strong peach flavor. So I would definitely recommend the Vintners over the Olive Nation for infusing for sure. But it does have a good, unique sweetness to it. And it does okay with after I post flavored some after the competition. When I got home about a month later, I tried post flavoring some with it to see if that worked okay. It's okay, but still not as good as a Tyranny, just in peach flavor. But I will say that's more concentrated, so you use less than you would the Tyranny, and it's probably a little cheaper because of the concentration differences, but it just didn't have the peach punch that I wanted. But I hear some of those other flavors are better, so I wouldn't not try it. But I will wait a week before the competition before I try any new thing ever again. Yes, sir, and they work well. Yeah, they work really well. Sure do. If you want some good sweet, make you some, neutral, and then rerun it, strip some neutrals, and then rerun it, infusing with snow cone flavorings. They make great ones. There is trying to think of the name of the candy manufacturer. Jolly Ranchers makes some pretty good. I think you can get them on. You can get them on Amazon. Jolly Rancher syrups for Jolly Rancher flavorings, And some of those are pretty good, like the green apple. A lot of people likes that green apple that they have, and some of their other flavors. So um, they make some good snow cone flavor uh, syrup, and there's quite a few out there that are good, and there's some that are pretty inexpensive that work real well too. The Jolly Ranchers is not real cheap, but there are some alternatives that are cheap, and if you're a customer at Webstront, have an account with them, you can get some really good ones through them real cheap. No problem, brother. Yeah, here's that chart, Dad. I guess I should call you Brian. Um, here's a chart here. If you want to screenshot it and copy and paste it, we'll also have it in the Moonshine Militia Facebook files. For those that want to have a copy on their phone, I try to keep a lot of these on my phone. It's just hard to remember all this shit, right? Who can remember all this shit? So that's why I like having these charts, because when you get my age, you can't remember all that shit like you used to. Fixing to add my water and cane sugar to my third gin sour mash. It wouldn't hurt, if is it all corn, or did you use any malts in it? I would say, with sour mash the way it is, there's a lot of dead yeast already building up in this. If you're leaving a lot of those behind, like your yeast beds and stuff behind with all the grains and stuff, all that, I would say you're probably good on nutrients just from the dead yeast, and probably enough live yeast in there still too if you're not dumping anything hot on it or high alcohol. Um, so you should be pretty good to go. It wouldn't. I mean, I'm not going to say it wouldn't hurt to try a little. Probably wouldn't hurt to try a little, but I wouldn't put a lot. I wouldn't put like a recommended dosage for sure. But I would say it's probably going to be okay because of the sediment bed and the flocculants and the stuff that you already have in there built up. There's usually going to be enough dead yeast and all that to do you for sure. I would save it for any of my fruit fermentations or any sugar washes or um, anything that doesn't have like a malt or a grain or something with some good yan and fan. Um, so what generation? Third gen? Okay. Yeah, I'd say you've probably got a pretty good yeast bed built up by now if you're saving all that. I mean, some people sparge all that off and just use the grain and don't really carry a lot of that forward. But if you are, and you should, I just wouldn't add any more. I wouldn't add more yeast, but I wouldn't also pour in high proof back set. I'd run it all the way down, and put the tails in right before I distill. And I would supplement a little bit of the grains each time, maybe, take a little bit out, put a little bit more back in fresh. I think you should be good on nutrients, though, if you've got a pretty decent little bit of yeast and old yeast bed that's getting carried over. If it's still thriving, alive. But you just don't want to, even if you do kill things off and then pour water on it, it's still going to be a nutrient, you know. You're just not going to have a lot of viable yeast. You might have to add yeast if you do, but yeah, I like having these charts. If we figured out what a lychee is, Lychee, let's figure this shit out. We're gonna learn something about lychee fruit. I guess it's a fruit. Yeah, it's a fruit. Wow, lychee fruit. Lychee is a monotypic taxon. Okay, we all know what that is. And the sole member in the genus Lychee of the soapberry family. There are 3 distinct subspecies of lychee. Most common is the Indo-Chinese lychee found in South China, Malaysia, and northern Vietnam. I guess that's why I don't know much about lychee. And the fact that it's expensive is fuck to try to get here. That's why we don't do lychee. So it tastes like sweet, slightly tart, and floral notes, with some people comparing it to a mix of strawberry, watermelon, and pear. Interesting. Nope, I've never had no lychee. What about you all? Anybody had lychee? Lychee. Don't know lychee. But as we were shopping, I was looking the other day and noticed people ask about dragon fruit sometimes. Have you ever done dragon fruit? Or man, them fuckers are $5 each. Unless you have a fucking orchard of these some bitches, who can afford that, man? I mean, that'd be some pricey fucking brandy. And I mean, it's $5 for each, and they're about like a little bit bigger than the average orange, man. It's pretty expensive. So I don't think I'll be doing anything like that anytime soon. So that sounds pretty good. So what's everybody's plans for tomorrow and Monday? Anybody got any fishing or mashing? I know I'm supposed to cut grass today. I put it off, so I'm gonna have to tomorrow before we get rain. Supposed to maybe get some rain on Monday or Tuesday, so I need to get a little bit of work done outside tomorrow. Yawn. Hell, what time is it? Just 9:45. Man, I've been tired. Haven't felt good. Starting to feel a little better though. But it got a little cold snap here. I don't know if where y'all at? Awesome. That's the benefits of having a big old freezer, man. You can start collecting your fruits and put them in there and collect. Save up and run them all at once. See something I ordered today. It's going to be help me out. It's one of these little attachments you put on your garden hose, and it'll measure how many gallons of water that you've used as it goes. So I have to test that out and see how that works. But it'll be helpful instead of trying to measure out and put marks on, level. On all my mash barrels, I've got them graduated with permanent marker, on the outside. But on my cookware and stuff, I haven't graduated it, made my little scratch marks on the inside of the pot. On my stainless, I'll take a little nail, I'll put in 5 gallons, and I'll scratch right at the edge of that pot on the inside. A 5, a 10, a 15, a 20. It's a 30-gallon pot, so that'll help me graduate it. But it'll also measure how much sprinkler, in your garden, how many gallons you're putting down your yard and your gardens and stuff. Pretty interesting. I got a timer, but it doesn't tell me how many gallons per minute and all that, gallons per hour. So this little thing measures all 4 of those. It'd be pretty interesting to use. I don't know how I got off on talking about that, but oh yeah, I'm filling up barrels and stuff. So it'll be handy to see how many gallons. It's not exact, but they say it's like a 5% accuracy, so that's not too bad. So if it's 100 gallons, it's plus or minus 5-gallon accurate. That's plenty close enough for me. I guess if you're doing totes or something, it'd be pretty handy to, if you're doing like 150, 200 gallons, you don't want to sit there and measure out fucking, each. And I guess you could graduate a tote pretty quickly with it that way. Yeah, apple muscadines, definitely. Definitely be good round. With one Brita filter. Now, we never did. Wait a minute. Let's get back here. I wonder what happened to the crazy corn, man. What happened to the crazy corn? Let's see. Let's see. Let's hope they follow up. Explain what crazy is. Anyway, will one Brita filter clean 2 gallons before proofing down? Yes, a 4-gallon grain finishing up and turn the last corn mash into awesome. First June sour mash coming a couple of days ago. Awesome. So will a Brita filter clean 2 gallons before proofing down? If you're just doing alcohol, a Brita filter will do a considerable amount because you're not really you're not building it up, right? You don't have a lot of floaties. You don't have a lot of matter to fill up, the pores in the filter. So you're going to be able to filter out a considerable uh, more amount of alcohol as opposed to like tap water, you know. So you go from a Brita to a zero. Cool. Um, Now the zero is taking it up to 0 part per million. Damn. Um, yeah, that's probably more than a. Yeah, that's probably going to take it down more than reverse osmosis. Maybe, I don't know. 0. Myro takes it down like 12 or 14, but it has a pretty decent flow rate. Some of those, you know, reverse osmosis, it just drips out, so it takes forever. This one has a pretty good stream, but it's not as effective as one that goes like drip, drip, drip. So, but I can do 10 or 20 gallons at the same amount of time that the drip, drip, drip does half a gallon, right? So it's a lot faster. So I'm happy with the 14 or 12, 14, something like that. Yeah, yeah, it's a good plan. Yeah, that's those zeros probably a lot more than the Brit is. Yeah, I just use the little um, refrigerator, the ones you screw into the refrigerator. Those do pretty decent. They're about the same thing. Close. I'm not, not to the zero, but the Brita, they're close to about what a Brita will do. I think that motorhome ones have, one that you can screw in is probably similar to a Brita, but it's not a zero. Those zeros are a little more expensive, and reverse osmosis, of course, is more expensive. But yeah, ours isn't too bad. Ours is fine unless we get either one of two things. If we get a whole lot of water and the rivers are murky as shit, we got a lot of runoff and stuff. Um, since they take most all theirs from the rivers around here, they're clean enough to do that. They have to use a lot more chlorine and filtering. And if it's stagnant and hasn't had any rain for a long period of time, and they're pumping low water that's kind of stagnant, they tend to use a little bit more chlorine because I guess you got more animal life buildup in, So um, those are the two times when we get a whole lot of water or none at all. That our water kind of sucks, but if it's just average, a little bit of rainfall, just your average time, we have pretty good water here in Kentucky, man. There's good clean water. Actually, Kentucky has more moving water than any state in the continental U.S. Alaska has more, but it's not a con. Well, not in continental U.S. It's continental to Canada, but um, out of the 48, Kentucky has the most moving water, and it's pretty damn clean water too. So one of the reasons they came here for a lot of whiskey making, and also because of the limestone here too as well. But a lot of moving water here in Kentucky. A lot of flooding as a result too. Yeah, yeah. There's some straight pipes going on, but you're gonna have that most everywhere that you go. One thing we've got some, farm runoff as well. We've got our fair share of farms and straight pipes from the old shitter, but that's still better when you compare to a lot of industry waste. So yeah, it is. Yeah, all the nitrogens and stuff that come out, the phosphates coming out. Yeah, it's not good. Yeah, yeah, but still, I'd rather deal with animal matter than chemical. From some industrial waste that they're dumping toxins and that kind of thing. I'd rather deal with more natural things like pig shit than you know some kind of these cancer causing chemicals that's coming out of some of these industries. There's certain rivers that you go, you can't even find live fish, minnows, and live critters in it. It's just like dead. So there's some really like Flint, Michigan. I believe I'll take my little shitty water over that any day. But yeah, it's there's good and bad everywhere. Yeah, I've seen some straight pipes going on for sure. Actually, I've seen quite a few in my day. My line of work, you see a lot of them. You have to inspect, but we don't always have to verify where it goes. A lot of times we assume that there's a septic tank. You know, you're not quite sure where it goes when you flush that. But yeah, it's good to check those tanks and make sure they're actually there. And it's not just peels, you know. Yeah. Well, they were, you know, talking about there's an issue too where people were dumping their old peels in the down the sink instead of dispose of them properly. They're just dumping them down the sink, and a lot of that was making it back into the drinking water. It's your answer. Well, I'm gonna go back and we'll find your question, Richard. What to the Fermax or I'm sorry. Uh-oh. I'm confused, brother. Oh, so you didn't get the answer for it? Probably won't need to add a lot of Fermax. Did you didn't sparge all the yeast bed off, did you? Did you do you have a lot of yeast bed carried over from the last one? I'm assuming. You know, the flocculants in the bottom, all that sediment at the very bottom. You keep all that, right? If so, a lot of that is dead yeast, and that with all that dead yeast in there, you'll have plenty of nutrients. And if you had any malted grains that you'd used in there, you'll have nutrients from those as well. If you want to supplement, which I do recommend you do on a sour mash, take maybe 5-10% out each time and just keep replenishing it with 10% fresh grain. That way, when you get to fifth, sixth, seventh generation, it doesn't start getting, you know, less flavor, washed out kind of tasting, you know, more of a sugar shine than a corn or a grain. So, you know, take 10% out, whatever your grain bill is, and add 10% back. It's easy to cook that 10% on your stove, you know, unless, of course, you're running a big batch. But for most of us running smaller batches, you know, you can, in a normal big pot on the stove, you can gelatinize, you know, a couple few gallons of corn and or a couple of gallons of water and some corn to convert and throw back in on top of it, you know, and perpetuate it. Put some little malt in there and keep your flavor profile going. You know, it's a little bit of extra work, but you don't have to do it every time. Maybe do it every 2 times, you know, and just kind of play with it and see what kind of schedule works best to maintain the flavors. But yeah, you don't have to do it every time. You can do maybe 15% every 2 times or something, you know, but just kind of keep supplementing it to kind of develop a consistency. I think helps. But I think you'll be good for yeast nutrients. I think just having that yeast bed will be good. Uh, if you pour some hot back set on it, you know you shouldn't really have to add a lot of yeast either. You know, you should have some live yeast already in that thing, so you should be able to get everything, of course, cooled off enough to where you don't kill the yeast. And when you pour it back in on top of your, on your sour mash, make sure that the back set's not too hot. Make sure the back set's not too acidic, and make sure the back set doesn't have too much alcohol. Right, all three things can kill yeast. So as long as it's a low proof and you run the tails out or mostly out, add some water and sugar to that. While it's still warm, and you can add the sugar to the back set, and then add water to the back set to cool it down, and then to add, that way you don't have to wait for it to cool all the way down, because it takes a long time for shit to get cool enough to start adding some things. So that's why they invented chillers, because people are impatient, man. I have an apple tree on my property and I'm new to shine. How should I take advantage of these free apples? Well, we can make some apple wine. And we were just showing you the chart here. I'll add it back up there. Let's go up to apples. So it can take 7 pounds if they're really, really good sweet apples, like a Honeycrisp or something really sweet, or 16 if it's a Granny Smith or a tart sugar, much less sugar, apple. Somewhere probably in between. If it's a sweeter apple, which people tend to grow, it'd be a 7 to 10 probably pounds of apples per gallon. I do know that it takes approximately 22 pounds of apples to squeeze into 1 gallon of pure apple juice, right? So using apple juice is a pretty fucking cheap alternative and a good supplement. So, use you some natural apples to get a good natural apple juice, and use pectic enzymes on them to help break them down before start measuring them for sugar content and all that. So add the pectic enzymes and help break them down, and supplement that with some apple juice. You don't probably wouldn't have to as much because you're going to get your apples for free, but if you're paying for apples, it helps a lot, because 22 pounds of apples, if they're $1 a pound, that's $22. And I don't know many gallons of apple juice that cost near that much. So it's very economical to use the apple juice. Just try to make sure that you get the 100% pure apple juice with no additives, no preservatives. Uh, and those definitely work best for you. The preservatives and the yeast a lot of times will kind of clash a little bit and not work as well together. And sometimes it'll kill some of your yeast off and cause some issues with fermentations getting stuck. But yeah, that's awesome. Great to have those free fruits. But and you can freeze them. You can cut them up and freeze them, and when you get enough, thaw them out, use them. Yeah, apple juice is definitely it takes like 20 to 22 pounds of apples to make a gallon of apple juice. I was really um have to? No, absolutely not. There's no rules like that you have to. It's just let me highlight this. Um, there's no have to, no. But it becomes to a point. It's a very efficient thing, and especially on certain fruits. Apples being one of them, because there's so much flesh there that you want to break up, and that flesh basically cell walls, and you break those cell walls up, and it allows all the goodies and sugars inside each cell to get out. All that sugar is trapped in each cell, and in the pulp, and in these apples and peaches and other fleshy type fruits, dense fruits. it's a little bit more important to use a pectic enzyme versus something maybe like a blackberry or a blueberry, which just, once you open up a blueberry, you've opened up a blueberry. There's really, the enzymes can help break down a lot of the cells inside there and release more sugars, but probably less critical on a blackberry than say like an apple or a banana or a peach or really fleshy type fruits. But it really does help, and it really is. It's amazing. Once you use it on something like peaches, for example, you'll smash in all your peaches, and it'll be the biggest slimy fucking mess you've ever seen. It's lots of pulp, and you'll use those pectic enzymes and go in a couple of days later. I like letting them work off for a couple of days, 48 hours, and you go back in there and it's just like it's all liquid. What happened to all that pulp, man? It's gone. It's amazing. It's all soupy liquid now, whereas before it was just a massive slime with a little bit of liquid in it, right? So it really it helps tremendously on fruits like that. Probably not so much on blackberries if they're muddled properly, uh, yeah. So, but cutting it up and freezing it helps break the cell walls up too, because the moisture inside the cell when you freeze it, just like ice cubes, it expands, right? So a lot of these cells will, expand and pop, but some don't. So it's not maybe as complete as a pectic enzyme, but if but pectic enzyme, a lot of people say has impact on the flavor, and it will add a little bit of extra heads to it, because it's breaking up the cell walls, which a lot of times is cellulose. And when you break up and convert cellulose into alcohol, you're creating methanol, right? So you're going to have a little bit more fours and heads to take off. But I think that's a small trade-off for the increase in production and flavor that you get, because you get a lot more juice per fruit. And not a silly question at all, brother. It's a good question. So yeah, you don't have to. Freezing definitely helps, and it's much better than not at all. Much. But if you can do both, and you wouldn't have to add as much pectic enzymes, if you did freeze it. So absolutely, freezing is definitely good. Definitely good to do, and much better than just using the fruit fresh, right? So even if you buy fresh fruit, put it in a bag, put it in the freezer, just let it get frozen. It doesn't have to get freezer burnt sitting there for 12 months. Just setting it in there till it gets frozen will help a lot. And then you won't need as much pectic enzyme to use. But it definitely helps for sure. Freezing does. But it's amazing, and you can do a cross comparison. You can get like a good peach mash and just blend it all to where it's all exactly, homogeneous, about the same slimy mess, and take half that slimy mess and put in one bucket, and take, the same slimy mess and put it in another bucket, and then use pectic enzymes on one and not the other. You'll be surprised. You'll be shocked at the difference it makes in a couple of days, man. It really does. They are very efficient, and it's just another enzyme. Doesn't convert, sugars or carbs or anything like that. It's not that type of enzyme. Uh, we're basically using it to break down cell walls to allow you to get to the juices and sugars inside the cells. And that's basically what the cells use for energy, to perform their functions. So that's how it works on a biological level. Absolutely. Yep. That'll work. Yeah, let them thaw out and then add those pectic enzymes to it. And I mean, you can do a test between the two, and see what kind of difference it makes. Before fermentation, right as soon as you're mashing, as soon as you're done mashing, add those pectic enzymes. When it gets down to temp, normal yeast pitching temps, but just wait a couple of days before you pitch that yeast and let the pectic enzymes do their thing. Or I guess you could, do them both at the same time. But I like to use the pectic enzymes, do the 48 hours, and then do a gravity reading after that, because it's going to open up to some sugars that I didn't have before. So my gravity is going to tend to go up a little bit. So I want to get a good, accurate reading on that. So I'll use those pectic enzymes, wait 48 hours, and then, check my gravity and kind of work from there. That's good deal, man. What am I going to try here? I'll drink some of my peachy peach. My not so peachy peach. My sweet, not so peachy peach. But it does taste good and sweet. It's good. It's good liquor. 100 proof. It's got a good taste. It's just not real peachy. But it's good good flavor. Good drink. It just doesn't have the good peach punch. I could do something with that though. I don't know. All right, let's see. So let's say someone was to run 7 to 8 gallons of some homemade rum, okay, and like a bever 3-pot 10-gallon, okay. How long should it take, and what flavor you put in the thumper? Okay, so if you got 8 gallons in a 7 to 8 in a 10-gallon pot, okay, you'll get about 15 to 20%, and it really depends on the ABV of your beginning or your ending mash. So when we take an initial gravity reading, if you look on your triple scale, you can kind of turn it around, and it'll show the mark of where it floats, and you can measure that at like 1.080. But if you kind of turn it around, that'll say like 6-8%. Let me get mine. I'll show you. One of the most important tools, and hopefully this will focus. Let's turn it like that. Dang it. I'll put my finger next to it. It'll focus. All right. Maybe if I got a macro setting on my camera, which I don't know. Anyway, let's try this. Okay, like a 1.080 is about 11. Okay. 1.060 can you hit the light? 5, 6, 7. Be about 8. So yeah, that's 1.062 is about an 8. That's the bottom of the blue there, where the blue starts getting into the orange. So anywhere between there and the middle of the orange, which is about 10. So you're going to be about 8 to 10%, kind of on average, of alcohol. So 8 to 10% of 7 gallons will be alcohol. So if we look at, let's just say 10% of 7 gallons is how much? 10% of 10 gallons is going to be a gallon. So let's just figure on 10 gallons to make it easy. So if we had 10 gallons and we had 10%, there would be a gallon of alcohol in there, right? So that's total. That's all the alcohol in there. So if you took everything out from the very first 4 shots all the way down to, like we were talking earlier, the 4% tails where it just doesn't get any less, you can get 96% of that back, right? So you're leaving 4% at the end because you just can't get those anymore. So you're looking at, 1 gallon at 10%. So you're going to get most of that back, right? But a portion of it, maybe 30%, is going to be 4 shots and heads. So there goes a third of a gallon. And then at the end, you're going to have about a third to, maybe a little bit more of tails. And then, of course, the difference will be hearts. But that's pure. So once you consider, it coming off at not 190, 198 or whatever, it's going to be coming off at maybe 160. So you're going to get close to maybe a gallon, a gallon or so of that on 7, out of a 10. You're going to get approximately maybe, a gallon and a half to 2 if it's a good, but that's proof down, right? That's once you get it down to a drinking proof. That's if you get it coming off at 160 and you proof it down to 100, you're going to get about a gallon and a half to 2 for every, 10 gallons. That's 15 to 20%, at a normal proof of 100. So that's just a rough guesstimate. It really depends on how hot it is when you start. If it's a 1.1, it's going to be, of course, a little bit more alcohol. If it's a lower than, like a grain, 1070 is going to be closer to, 7 or 8%. You're not going to get as much, but if you, I will say this, if you start saving those tails and quit throwing good alcohol away, like probably 80% of the people do out there, they'll distill down to about 80 proof, and then they hit their tails and they just throw it away. And that's like throwing 80% alcohol away. That's 80 proof, man. That's what's in a jar that you buy. Now, it's just because it's tails, it doesn't taste good, doesn't mean that there's not good alcohol that could be, reclaimed from that. Because in the next distillation, you can separate that ethanol from the tails and fusel oils very easily. So, and it's good flavored ethanol, and it doesn't have acetone in it. So, definitely, um, collect your tails for sure, and that'll definitely increase. So, as I was getting ready to, so if you're adding tails to your mash, you can expect that number to go up tremendously because you're putting a bunch of alcohol back into it. 80 would be 40%. 80 proof is 40%. So if you're putting 40% back on top of a 10% mash, you're going to get a lot more than just the gallon and a half, right? So it definitely pays to save those tails and to add them, and it's all the old timers did. That's what we put in the thumpers. We didn't infuse a lot of flavors and do a lot of that. We were putting tails back into the mash right before we ran it, or the barrel, the steel before we ran it, or we were putting it in the thumpers, to increase that production and to increase the amount, good liquor that you're getting off of it. So definitely save those tails, and you'll solve that production dilemma real quick, and quit throwing away all that alcohol, everybody. Damn it. Save that shit because it is good and it is recoverable. Sipping some apple pie. Absolutely, brother. $4 and add the fruit that you mashed to your thumper for your wash. I'm assuming you're talking about time. I'm not, I don't know what that's in relation to, brother. The bearded genius and us are here again. Hell yeah, what's going on, CB? Good to see you, brother. That shit show got a little crazy last night, didn't it, CB? Damn, them boys was going at it. That was funny as shit. That's good. All right, let me try that. That's good. It might be that because all that background, it was trying to focus on that. That's a good point. Let's give her a shot here and see if it how my glass face anyway. Nothing else. Okay. Yeah, that's helping some. Is it? I don't. This is a cheap. Actually, this is a cheap old Logitech 720p camera. It doesn't look bad for what it is, but yeah, I think I got some macro. Oh wait a minute, maybe this works better. I've got some macro settings. Yeah, that works all right like that. Let's see. Does that work better? Put paper in front of it. Maybe it'll work better. uh, yeah, this thing doesn't really autofocus very well. I guess it's just got the focal distance has got to be 2 foot away or more to focus. And there might be some macro settings. Yeah, a little gander. Yeah, it is an old little camera, but it's been a dandy. I've had it a long time, and usually when you have them this long, let me see if my controller. Well, I got a zoom on there, but I'll the macro option. But usually stuff gets this old and Windows doesn't have drivers for it anymore, right? Motion detection. I probably should controls or let's see if oh, well, it's in use by another application. I can't fool with it. Anyway, move the camera back. Get off my belly. Um, yeah, the autofocus doesn't really work that closely. I think it has to be like this far. Or, let's see. Yeah, focus. I can get on that dirty ass fingernail I got up there. I don't know, maybe there about a foot. Yeah, it's not the best. But it's an old 720 little Logitech that I've had probably 10, 12 years or so since 720 was out. And it has a decent little microphone on it. I'm not using the microphone on my headset that broke anymore. So the microphone that I'm using, everybody says it sounds pretty clear and loud and clear. And that's coming from the microphone on that. It doesn't eliminate noise in the back as well as like my headset when I speak directly into. So it's a different type mic, but it does okay. You know, it gets me through. Oh, this question was about time. Well, shit. So let's say someone was drinking 7, 8 gallons of some homemade rum in of every 3 pot. How long? He sure did, didn't it? I thought he was trying to get volume. Um, Yeah, you'll probably get a drip in about an hour. Start maybe dripping in about an hour and 15 minutes. And I'd say, if you run a real fast drip to a small, just barely a stream, 4 hours, yeah, like just say it's 4 hours would be about right. Maybe five, because the plumbing's a little bit small on those, so they don't run as quick as some of the other ones. So you may be looking at, maybe an hour and 15, hour and a half, before you get good drips, and then maybe by the time you're starting your tails, 4 hours, four and a half. And if you run your tails out, of course, when you start hitting your tails, everybody, you can turn up the heat. Right? Don't scorch anything. Don't overdo it. Don't melt the pot. But turn up the heat a little bit and get through those tails quicker. There's no need to go medium high on those. Just go high enough to where it doesn't scorch or burn or give you some off flavors, and just cruise right through those tails and strip them off there, and use them for the next, get them ready for the next run. Just put them in a bucket, and make them ready. So I'm sorry, I would get. Most people are always asking how much alcohol out of that. I don't know how in the hell I read that. Um, you can put any flavor in the thumper you want to, man. I mean, you can put anything from uh, concentrates like the Olive Nation and the Mona and the Tranny. There's lots of different concentrates. Um, you can, like have y'all ever used the daily strawberry daiquiri stuff? It's got the fresh strawberries and the juice and the syrup and stuff in it. It's got like a nice little two-handled, rings. I'm sure you've all seen the dailies at the liquor store. Those make good infusions, like that strawberry makes a strawberry daiquiri. Their strawberry daiquiri mix makes good infusion. So you can put whatever in that thumper you want to infuse. Concentrates tend to do better, but if you have a really big thumper, it's expensive, kind of difficult to do because you really need to keep those flavors concentrated, and if you're building up a lot of water, you need to be able to drain that water and add more concentrates. And of course, if you have a big thumper, it's going to take a lot of infusion juices to add to that big 5 gallon thumper, right? So that's where the smaller jar rigs kind of come in handy, because it doesn't take as much infuser, and you can kind of concentrate it. And after you run a quart of liquor out, you can take that quart infuser out, dump it, put in some fresh, and then screw it back in there and get another quart. And do quart for quart, or a quart for 2 quarts, and kind of play with it and see what kind of flavor differences. It's all an experiment. There's no set rules. There's certain practices you'll find that are better than others, but it's all about finding what works best, and experimenting and trying different things. I'm glad you read that. I totally misread it. Yeah, you'll get out of a 10 gallon run, you'll get a you know gallon and a half proof down to 2 gallons. I do mostly, on the little 15 or 18 and a half. I run 15, and I'll get 2 to 2.5 out of it. So 1.5 to 2, I would say, would be about right. Out of 7 to 8, you're probably going to get a gallon to a gallon and a half, right? You know, proof down, not prior to proof. You'll get if it's 160 and you proof it down to 80, you're getting twice as much. So if you get, 3 jars, that's equivalent to a gallon and a half at 80, right? So 3 quarts is a gallon and a half. 3 quarts of 160 is a gallon and a half of 80. So once you get proof down, it adds quite a bit more to it. He did a 5-gallon mix of molasses and sugar, kind of pineapples, peaches, pears, 30 strawberries, quarter blackberries. Then he used daddy yeast. Interesting. Well, that'll work out fine, man. I just is use that hydrometer. This right here. Always. This is one of the most important tools to making a good mash and creating your own recipes right here. Because fail safe, you'll get the right starting sugars that you're going to need if they're converted. Just can't tell if they're converted or not, right? You can do the iodine test to see if you got starches remaining. But using this, you can take any recipe like all of this and mix it all together. And right before you pitch yeast or anything, strain out, get it good mixed, strain out the liquids, and get it separated from the solid in a graduated cylinder, and float that bad boy in there and do a reading, and see if it's where you want it to be. If you need a little bit more sugar, uh, then oh yeah, you'll know just exactly how much. You add little by little till you get it right there. As experience teaches you, you can get maybe dial it in a little quicker, but and then write everything down and document it. The next time you won't need that if you do it just exactly the same way. The fruits, pretty much consistent as far as sweetness wise. So yeah, it's absolutely a must. So you've got to just buy one. Don't even question it. A lot of people, if you're just going to be one of those people that follow a recipe and not really into all that, just happy following a recipe and making the mash and running it and getting good results. If that's what makes you happy, absolutely don't have to have one of these. Nothing's a must have. They made it for many, many moons without them. I made it many, many moons without them, but it's so helpful, to make things right. And I don't necessarily mean better, but it you know where you start, and you're not starting too sweet or not sweet enough. It helps to dial that in. It's important, and I think everybody should use it. And I think if you would have shown that to and explained it to a mountain moonshiner, he would have happily kept this on his, still site and would have used it. But he may have thought at the same time, well, hell, what the hell I need that for? I run the same damn recipe I've run for 30 fucking years. It's been handed down. I don't need it. And, you don't. Once you get your recipes dialed in and your grains and fruits are pretty consistent, and your conversions are pretty consistent, you really don't need it. You can just replicate and do it. So it's just handy to have and to use. I I I love using them now. I didn't always have one. Not necessarily. I'm just saying. That's how much difference. Some people say, "Oh, well, you're only going to get 3 jars off that." Right, 3 jars of 160. So 3 jars of 160, 3 quarts of 160 can also be a gallon and a half of 80. Right. So, uh, which can be a gallon and a quarter probably of 100, right? So it's going to be a lot more once you proof it down. So, but yeah, if you take it from 160 proof to 80 proof, you're doubling, you know, the volume, cutting everything in half. So you go from 3 jars to, three quarters of a gallon to a gallon and a half. And that's when somebody says you're going to get a gallon and a half out of that, that's what they mean. Or 2 gallons. Some people say, "Oh, you'll never get that out of there. I only get a 3 quarts of 160 myself," and they don't understand you're talking about proofed alcohol, but it'll vary. So nobody told me what they got planned for tomorrow. Okay, I missed that question. I'm sorry, Steve. My girl is asking, have you ever tried to make something with canned cranberry sauce? And no, I have not. But I do think cranberry is on the list here, and it can be done. There's good cranberry wines out there. I've done cran apple. I've done cran grape, with the juices and wines and stuff, but I've never done just cranberry. So, but I have used like the cran apple, love cran apple, and love the cran grape. But as far as just straight cranberry from a can fresh, no, or just fresh cranberries, no, I've not done that. Yeah, 160. You'd be surprised at how many steels come off at 160 these days. I mean, a football steel, mine can easily come off that with packed with copper and some marbles. My my column without even hardly pushing my deflegmator, I can get, you know, 150, 60, with no bubble plates, just with a little cool water going through a defleg. So I mean, it's easy for me to dial it in, but yeah, it's you'd be surprised. 160 seems to be 140 to 60 is what a lot of steels put out these days. Smoking some ribs. It does sound good. Yeah, I'm glad that the two of you are working together. I've got a little berry masher of my own that helps me cook from time to time. And helps me make wine, and we do a lot of canning. We make salsas and marinaras and spaghetti sauces and things like that. Starting to get into more canning. Am I a Yankee? Lord, have you heard my accent? That's I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I think I think that was a joke. I think that was some sarcasm right there. I'm just saying. I think that was a little bit of sarcasm I noted into that. I know you're being funny. That's good. Yeah. No, I've not been confused for a Yankee by most people. Oh man, I'm telling you, Ann makes some of the best fucking salsa. We got some from Chili's the other day, and everybody talking about it's good. It's trash compared to Ann's. It's trash. Yeah, man, she makes some killer salsa. But it had 4 different tomatoes in it. It had some heirloom tomatoes and everything grown fresh here in the garden. Uh, had my banana peppers were in it. My jalapeno peppers were in it. My poblano peppers were in it, and my bell peppers were in it. So I had 4 different types of peppers and 4 different types of tomatoes in there. It's really good, real good. Oh, I love everybody, Steve. I don't care. But it is interesting to note uh, accents and the way people are from different places. But yeah, I'm telling you, man, and sausage is awesome. No, I'm not a Yankee or a Confederate. I'm an American living in the 21st century, brother. But I don't know, if I grew up back then, what I'd probably been like a lot of other people in Kentucky. I'd have been like, I don't give a fuck about either side. I'm just trying to make ends meet. Y'all battle it out. I'm just scratching out a living here in the mountains. I don't give a fuck what you do down there on the plantations or up there in the factories, which was the attitude of a lot of people in the Appalachians. They really didn't give a shit. But they were brought into the war because they were some of the best shots and stopped by both sides. Back then, though, it was a little less denounced back then than it is now. I guess now it's more pronounced because people of Appalachia, hunt a lot more than your average folk. So now I'd say it's a lot more. Uh, there's a lot more heroes and a lot more people come from Appalachia in the military that are snipers and crack shots and good trackers and I guess trained killers, from hunting than people that grew up in the city, never really held guns or did much with guns and stuff. So tend to make better soldiers either way, and that's from Pennsylvania mountains all the way down to the Georgia mountains, and in between. So they had them on both sides. My thoughts on the war was, I try not to get too political. So, parties really not so much as important back then, but the events. Whereas the South was producing a lot of raw goods, and the North took those raw goods and made finished products out of it, and then turned around and sold it back to the South, and they put a big markup on it, and little taxation without representation, a little bit. Um, so there was that going on. So it wasn't so much about slavery. Slavery was basically used as a tool to get more people brought into the war because he wasn't getting support, and Lincoln wasn't getting the support in the North that he had anticipated by just you know calling the battle cry. So uh, all of a sudden, slavery became an issue to get more people involved. And I don't know why we're talking about this anyway. Um, Lincoln didn't make liquor, so let's talk about George Washington. Yeah, he made liquor. Jefferson, them boys, they knew what to do. But yeah, I try not to get so much caught up in a lot of that. The media tries to polarize us with a lot of that type stuff when, we just need to focus on common sense, which, I don't. If you notice, I don't talk about a lot about politics because there's nothing that will piss 50% of the people off more than talking about politics, and the other 50% will agree with you. Where is I like to kind of stay neutral when in this setting. For that reason, I don't want to. It's not so much about that. It's just much about making liquor and being the brotherhood, of liquor makers, and let that be our common ground. If politics can't be our common ground, then we can have other commonalities other than politics. Yeah, yeah, I'd love to try some Amanda and Alan Bishop and I guess JJ and a bunch of them have been up there to Mount Vernon and made some of George Washington's recipe in the distillery. Well, it's not the exact same distillery. I think maybe it's a replica, but maybe it is the original. I think it's a replica. Maybe the original got destroyed. I'll have to inquire about that. But maybe the original stills were salvaged. I don't know. No, man, come on, bro. We don't. No, we don't want to. We don't want to. Well, first of all, there's only so much that we can say. You won't be banned for the next one, but I can't allow things to be said that Facebook will or YouTube. I'm not trying to censor anybody and not trying to piss anybody off. And I was trying to delete the post without banning, but I don't know why the fuck it didn't do that. I didn't want to ban the dude. He'll be back. He'll be able to be back. It's just this show that he gets banned for. But yeah, we can't use that kind of talk, and the reason being is it's kind of wrong, but at the same time, it'll get us banned off Facebook and off YouTube because they do care, and I don't want my shit messed up, and I don't want Fubilly's pages to get messed up because of comments that kind of got awry. So if anybody knows DD, tell him he's not permanently banned. He can come back next week, but not to say those comments. And how the hell can I just? Well, I hit the wrong damn. Okay, I should have just deleted comment. But anyway, yeah, yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get into racism and racist stuff. It's there's no place for that here. I'm not. It's not that type of podcast. You know, other people can have them podcasts. Again, DD, if you can still hear, I'm not sure if it just banned the comment or banned you from being able to comment. I was just trying to delete your comment and it banned you. So you're welcome to come back. And let's see if it shows anybody as banned. I might be able to unban it. If I'm not trying to censor people, but there's only so much that we can say and can't say. Yeah. Why is it says no banned guests? I just banned somebody. What's up with that? So we'll find out. If so, hopefully he can come back. If not, don't say that kind of shit or I'm gonna have to delete or ban it, accidentally. Anyway. No, I'm talking about the dude that used the N word. Talking about somebody's daughter having a N word baby or something. I don't know how the hell we get so far off from that. Did it even? Well, we also know that certain people have asked people to come in here and give us a hard time here. So that could be somebody intentionally trying to get us in trouble on YouTube and Facebook because of jealousy and pettiness. So that's always a possibility too. And looking back at his posts, he wasn't a bit interested in talking about distilling. I'm scrolling back and I'm not seeing anything, that he had to say about distilling or anything. So he had a purpose to be here and it wasn't talking about distilling. So probably best thing to ban him. Fuck him. Bye bye. So yeah. Actually, if you were here Wednesday, you probably saw an individual that came in and started talking stuff, and he's been pretty much um, banished from most of our sites for taking donations and not following through with forwarding them until maybe partially much later. But after he was in here and got his comments deleted from in here, from talking crap, he went back to his group and played the victim and told people to come over here and give me hell, which I'm sure that dude probably was a part of it, and they're probably trying to use that kind of language to get us taken down on Facebook and YouTube because they're petty and jealous. I know, Steve. You just have to go back and watch it, bro. Actually, I did go back and look at it, and it doesn't even show up anymore in the stream. Even in the comments, if you're doing real time and stuff. Damn, these fruit flies. I hate them. It's not the freaking moss, it's the fruit flies in here, man. So, yeah, I went back and looked. It's not even there anymore, so you can't even see it if you wanted to. But, yeah, it wasn't much. Just stupid drama, a bunch of petty people that nothing better to do and starve for attention. Sad. Sad, sad. You know, some people, grown men act like fucking children, you know. That's what it was. And thank you, Miss Lisa. I tried down delicately. I really didn't mean to ban the dude, but after I started looking back, you know, pretty much his question, are you a Yankee? You, Confederate then, long live the South, Redneck Mafia, MF, General Lee. I mean, what does all that even mean? You know, why? Yeah. And then using the M bomb and having your daughter having a, you know, yeah, that's people, you know, craziness. Well, what are you gonna do? You know, just ban and move on, laugh about it. But how about the amount of amylase? A lot of people didn't know, you know, to a lot of the fruits, you know, to add a little bit. And I wouldn't use the recommended dosage, you know, grams per gallon. Because this is probably closer to the recommended, and then these are probably a lot less. So this might be a pretty good chart to go by. It's like a pretty good chart. Thanks for sharing it, brother. But I will post that, and I will send it to you, Richard. Who else wants me to send it to him? Send me a message on Facebook so I can forward it, or you can get it from the militia files or from DIY Shining Stuff files or Rock Gut Moonshine files. I'll try to add it to all those, and it'll be probably, I don't know, what should I call this? Because it's fruit and vegetables, and I try to name the file something that describes it instead of P894722. You know, how about, you know, fruit and vegetable ratios per gallon or something like that, so you can see it and you know what it is when you see it. I think that's what I'll call it. So let me rename that now. Let's see, where did I? Yeah, that'll be in my. Damn it, screenshots right there. Screenshotted. Let's see, save as. Going to, and it's PNG. I'm going to say fruit and vegetable ratio. So it'll be yeah, it'll be in the files as fruit and vegetable ratios. And I'm going to add it to several of my files so I can find it when I look for it. So I have to add it to several different folders. Definitely helps. It's hard for me to find shit, so I have to put it in 2 or 3 different folders. That way I can stumble upon it in one of many ways. Pictures. Yeah, there, put it in there. That'd be a good place for it too. All right, ladies and gents, it's about the 11 o'clock time. Yeah, they do, man. It's like, yeah, I think it's definitely time. Well, everybody who wants this, if you can get a screenshot here, for me in Windows 11, I just hit print screen, and this little snippet tool comes up, and I just outline it from here to here. I drag it and make a, and it'll just copy and screenshot just that, and that way when you save it, it'll be big. When you open it, it'll be full page. But it'll also be saved in the militia files, or if you want to send me a Facebook message and saying, can you send me that fruit to vegetable ratio chart? That's what we're going to call this, fruit and vegetable ratio, because it's giving you the ratio of fruit to a gallon of water. So, and giving you a pretty much guessing point as far as what gravity will be if you use these, so yeah, just shoot me a message and we'll get them to you. But another incentive to get on the militia and join that page and get all these charts and all the videos. Also, the Distilling 101 page. For those that don't know, on your video, you'll see that at the very top above where you chat, it'll say Distilling 101 podcast page. If you can, just highlight that and drop down, it'll say liked, message, and it has 3 dots. Hit that like button for sure, but click those 3 dots and follow. And that way, when we go live, you'll get a little bit of a notification that we're going live, and so you'll know to tune in, or you'll know to catch it later. On the way to work tomorrow, or we get quite a few people actually. At any given time, we'll have 30, 20, 30, 40 people watching live, but the views of people over the next several days gets into the hundreds and thousands sometimes. So the majority of the people pick this up on the way to work, or listen to it at their convenience or when they have time, and that's awesome. I love that people are able to kind of listen to it at their leisure and listen to us all chat and pick up and learn something as they go along. What's going on, Jackson? You found the right place, brother. It's just at the wrong time. We're about to log off, but mark this and like and subscribe over there on YouTube. And every Wednesday and Saturday, we sit and chat and answer questions and discuss distilling and making wine and distilling brandies, and making whiskeys and rums and tequilas and all that good stuff. So if you have questions, you've got an interest in home distilling and want to start as a hobby, you found the right place, brother. And with that, it's 11 o'clock, so it's about time to get out of here. It's kind of a high bye for Jackson, but we'll be back Wednesday, Jackson, at 8 Eastern. So if not, you can always rewind that button when we log off and catch it from the start. Maybe listen to it on the drive to work tomorrow. We're on YouTube. We also stream to Twitch and to Kick. Look for Moonshine Militia on both of those, and you can listen to it on your phone or on your PC if you got one in your car. We're on YouTube and Facebook as well. So as I was saying, yep, what's going on, Scott? Doing good, brother. Just getting ready to log off, man. It's 11. Good night, Lisa. Everybody, I want y'all to have a great and safe Memorial Day weekend. Spend some time with your family and spend some time, praying and thanking our vets. And with that, we'll bid you off. Further ado, have a great weekend and have some good cookouts over the weekend and don't drink too much shine. We'll see y'all Wednesday. Shine on.